In 1944, the United States Army made a decision they thought was a punishment. They took a group of highly trained black nurses, women who had fought for the right to serve their country, and instead of assigning them to care for American soldiers, they sent them somewhere else entirely. They sent them to care for the enemy, German prisoners of war, captured soldiers of the Third Reich, shipped to the Arizona desert. It was meant to be an insult, a reminder of where these women stood. What the Army did not anticipate, what no one could have anticipated, was that inside one of those camps, a young black nurse from Massachusetts would lock eyes with a 19-year-old German paratrooper. And he would walk straight across the room and tell her he was going to marry her. She didn't believe him. She was wrong. This is the story of Elinor Powell and Frederick Albert, two people who were never supposed to meet, in a place neither of them chose, during a war neither of them started, who chose each other anyway, through beatings, through an ocean between them, through laws designed to keep them apart, every single day, for the rest of their lives. Stay with us. You are not going to want to miss a single moment of this. But before we go back to 1944, if you believe that love is worth fighting for, hit subscribe right now. We bring you stories like this every single week. Real people, real love, real history. Don't miss the next one. And now, let's hand things over to Elinor herself. This is her story in her words.
I have lived a long life, long enough to know that most people spend too much of it waiting for the right moment, the right city, the right circumstances. They wait for the world to make room for them. Frederick never waited for anything. The first time I saw him, I was standing near the doorway of the officers' mess hall at Camp Florence, Arizona. It was in 1944. The desert heat had a way of sitting on your shoulders like something heavy and permanent. I was 23 years old, a nurse in the United States Army, though that title came with some complications I will get to in a moment. Frederick Albert was working in the kitchen. He was German. He was a prisoner of war. And the moment he saw me, he put down whatever he was doing, walked straight across that room, looked me directly in the eyes, and said, in an accent I could barely understand, "You should know my name. I am the man who is going to marry you." Now, I want you to understand what I was dealing with. I was a young woman in the middle of a desert, in the middle of a war, surrounded by all manner of complications that most people today cannot begin to imagine. And this man, this German prisoner of war who had no business saying anything of the sort, said that to me. I didn't know whether to laugh or to walk away. I think I did a little of both. But here's the thing about Frederick Albert. He meant it, every single word. Let me back up. I was born in Milton, Massachusetts in 1921. I grew up in a home where we were taught that you worked hard, you held your head up, and you contributed something to the world. My mother was a woman of extraordinary patience. My father was a man of principles. They raised me to believe that I had something to offer, even when the world was not particularly interested in receiving it. When the war came, I wanted to serve. I had trained as a nurse, and I genuinely believed, that a country at war, calling for nurses, would want every capable pair of hands it could find. What I learned was that it was more complicated than that. The Army wanted nurses, yes, preferably white ones. They turned away black nurses in large numbers even as their hospitals filled and their lists of wounded grew longer and longer. It seems extraordinary now. It seemed extraordinary then, too, even in the middle of it, because logic will tell you a wounded man is a wounded man. He needs care, and a trained nurse is a trained nurse. She can provide it. But logic and the United States Army were not always on speaking terms in 1944. Eventually, they did begin accepting some black nurses. I was among them. I put on that uniform with pride. I had earned the right to wear it, and no one was going to take that from me. But I will admit, and I say this now from a great distance, that what came next tested that pride more than I had anticipated. They sent us to Arizona. Camp Florence was a prisoner of war camp in the desert, one of many set up across the United States to house captured Axis soldiers. It had started out as home to Italian POWs who were, by all accounts, a rather cheerful group. They sang. They put on little performances. The Italian men had decided that being captured was no reason to stop enjoying life. By the time I arrived, the Italians were gone. Italy had surrendered in 1943, and they had been moved along. In their place were German prisoners, a very different sort of group. And this was to be our assignment. We, the black nurses, would not be caring for American soldiers. We would be caring for the enemy. I am going to be honest with you. That stung. We had offered ourselves to our country, and our country had pointed us toward the men who had been trying to destroy it. There was a message in that, and none of us missed it. But I have spent a lifetime choosing what I focus on, and I made a decision, somewhere on that long journey to the Arizona desert, that I was going to be the best nurse I could be. Because that was who I was, and no assignment, however insulting its intention, was going to change that. Now, Frederick. Frederick Albert was born in 1925 in Oppeln, Germany. He was 19 years old when I met him. 19. A boy, really, though he would have been deeply offended to hear me say so. He had volunteered to be a paratrooper. I asked him about this later, much later, after we knew each other well enough for him to tell me the truth. And he admitted it had not exactly been a decision born of deep patriotism or military strategy. He had done it to impress his father. His father was a man who had fought in the First World War, a distant man, the kind of father who was always present in the house but somehow never quite there. Frederick had spent his boyhood trying to earn something from that man, some acknowledgement, some warmth, some sign that he was seen. He thought becoming a paratrooper might do it. It didn't. His father, as Frederick told it, was not particularly moved, and so Frederick found himself a paratrooper for a father who did not care much either way, stationed in Italy, fighting a war he had not fully chosen, when the Allies captured him and shipped him across an ocean to a camp in the Arizona desert. He always said in his later years that being captured was the best thing that ever happened to him. I reminded him that this was a rather alarming thing to say. He would shrug and say, "It brought me to you, didn't it?" Frederick was assigned to work in the kitchen of the officers' mess hall. He was a good worker, methodical, careful, and apparently quite talented with food, which is not something you necessarily expect from a young German paratrooper. After his declaration, "I am the man who is going to marry you," I did not exactly run toward him with open arms. I was a practical woman, a nurse. I dealt in realities, and the reality was that we were separated by language, by nationality, by war, by every rule that existed in that place. I told myself it was ridiculous. I told myself to forget about it. He did not forget about it. He started making things for me, special things from the kitchen, a little extra here, something prepared just so there. Nothing dramatic. He couldn't afford dramatic. But there was always an intentionality to it, a care that I found impossible to ignore. We found ways to talk, despite the language barrier. His English was halting and earnest, and sometimes spectacularly wrong in ways that made me cover my mouth to keep from laughing. My German was essentially non-existent, but we managed. We found a language between us, part English, part gesture, part sheer stubbornness on both our parts. I learned that he liked music, that he had a younger sister he worried about back in Germany, that he found the Arizona desert both horrifying and magnificent, that he was funnier than he looked, that he paid attention to things, to the way I carried myself, to what made me smile, to what made me go quiet. Nobody had paid that kind of attention to me before. It is a remarkable thing to be truly seen by another person. It has a way of changing you, quietly, without your permission. I told myself it was dangerous. I told myself 100 reasons why this was foolish. And every day, I went back to that mess hall, and Frederick found some reason to be nearby, and we talked a little more. And I found myself looking forward to it in a way I could not quite suppress. Love is not always a grand announcement. Sometimes it arrives in small, persistent, impossible-to-ignore ways, like Frederick Albert standing in a kitchen in the Arizona desert, making something just for you. It could not stay quiet forever. When some of the American officers found out what was happening between us, they were not pleased. They made that displeasure known, physically, in the case of Frederick. He was beaten, badly. He told me what had happened, and I held his face in my hands, and I felt something harden in me that has never entirely softened. Not hatred. I do not think I am built for sustained hatred. But something resolute. Something that said, "This is wrong, and I will not let it stop us." Frederick looked at me and said very quietly, "I am not going anywhere." That was all. He was not going anywhere, and neither was I. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over, and the prisoners went home. Frederick was sent back to Germany along with the others. There was no ceremony to it. There was no grand farewell. There was just the reality of war and its aftermath, which has a way of moving people around the world without consulting their hearts. I will not pretend that the parting was easy. It was not easy. We were two people who had found something extraordinary in the most unlikely of places, and now that place was dissolving, and we were being carried in opposite directions by the currents of history. But Frederick had said he was going to marry me. He had said it the first day he ever spoke to me, and he had not stopped meaning it since. He told me before he left that he would come back. I believed him. I am not entirely sure why I believed him. There was every practical reason in the world to think it would be impossible. Germany was in ruins. International travel was not a casual undertaking. We had no money, no plan, no official permission to do anything of the sort. But I believed him, because Frederick Albert had a way of saying things as though they were already true. He came back. I will not pretend I know exactly how he managed it, because the logistics of post-war life in Germany were extraordinary in their complexity. But Frederick was a man who, once he had decided something, arranged the world accordingly. He made his way back to the United States. He found me. By then, we already had our first child together, a fact that I trust speaks for a portion of the story I will leave to your imagination. We were married in 1947 in Manhattan, New York. We married in Manhattan specifically because we had to. Down south and out west and in many other places across this country, what we were doing was technically illegal. The laws said that a person with skin like mine could not legally marry a person with skin like Frederick's. They called these laws many things. I called them wrong. Manhattan was different. Manhattan, bless it, had seen enough of everything that two more people in love did not cause much of a stir. We stood in front of a justice of the peace, the two of us, in the city that has always made room for the kinds of people the rest of the country can't quite figure out what to do with. And we were married. I wore a dress I had saved for. Frederick wore a suit that was slightly too large for him. He had lost weight since I first knew him, and he was always embarrassed by that suit. I told him he looked wonderful, because he did. He looked like the man I loved standing next to me, which made him the most wonderful-looking man in any room. Our life together was not simple. I want you to know that, because simple would be a lie, and this story deserves the truth. We moved, many times. We moved in search of a community that could accept the simple fact of us. A German man, a black woman, their children. It sounds unremarkable, doesn't it? Put that way, it sounds like any family. But the world had opinions about it, and those opinions followed us. We went to Germany for a time, Frederick's homeland, where I was a foreigner in every sense. We came back to the States. We tried different cities, different neighborhoods, different possibilities. Each time, we were looking for the same thing, a place where we could simply be, without our existence being treated as a problem that needed solving. Our children grew up in the middle of all this. I think it taught them something. I hope it did. That the world is larger than its rules, that the people who love you are the ones who matter, that you can make a home in the most unlikely circumstances as long as you make it together. Frederick and I fought sometimes, as married people do. We disagreed about things large and small, as married people do. But I never once doubted that he loved me. Not once. That certainty is rarer than people think. I have never taken it for granted. In 1959, we found our place, Norwalk, Connecticut, an interracial neighborhood, a community of people who had perhaps also spent time being moved along, being told they didn't quite fit, and who had decided to fit together instead. We settled there. I planted a garden. Frederick, to my great delight, turned out to be a genuinely terrible gardener, and remained enthusiastically involved in the project anyway. Our children went to school. We had neighbors we liked. We had a life that was, in its daily particulars, wonderfully ordinary. And ordinary, after everything we had been through to get there, I felt like the greatest luxury imaginable. People sometimes ask me what I would say about our story, what the lesson is, what they should take from it. I am not much of a philosopher. I am a nurse. I deal in what is real. What is real is this. I met a man in a kitchen in the Arizona desert who told me, on the very first day, that he was going to marry me, who made me meals when he had very little to give, who was beaten for loving me and did not stop, who crossed an ocean and kept his word, who held my hand in a city that would let us be married and stayed by my side for the rest of his life. Frederick Albert was not a perfect man. He was stubborn and sometimes infuriating and, as I mentioned, a genuinely catastrophic gardener. But he was mine and I was his, and we chose each other every day in a world that gave us every reason not to. I have heard people say that love conquers all. I don't know that I believe it quite so simply. Love does not conquer. Love persists. It is patient and it is stubborn, and sometimes it is made of very small things: a meal prepared with care, a hand held in a hallway, a promise kept across an ocean. The world did not make room for us. We made room for each other. And that in the end was enough. More than enough. It was everything.
Elinor Powell, Frederick Albert, Two people who found each other in the most impossible of circumstances and held on. If their story moved you, and I think it did, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what moment in their story hit you the hardest? Was it Frederick walking across that room, the beating, and him saying he wasn't going anywhere? Or the two of them standing in Manhattan finally married? Tell us. We read every single comment. And if you believe that love like this deserves to be remembered, please share this video, pass it on. Someone in your life needs to hear this story today. Hit the like button if Elinor and Frederick made you believe in something. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We bring you stories like this every week. Real love, real history, real people who refuse to give up. Subscribe. You won't regret it. We'll see you in the next one.